Good morning. It is Saturday, April the 28th. This is Ron. Welcome to Story Time. Good morning. And so yesterday and the day before that, I was discussing making the presumption for the status quo and going into detail about what it means to make the presumption for the status quo. This morning, there's an additional area um, that this covers. It's a pretty broad idea, and that's the whole thing with philosophy. Is philosophy deals with subjects and areas that are at their broadest, the all-encompassing questions. Excuse me. So, making the presumption for the status quo not only includes what I was talking about yesterday and the day before, but also it's about making giving everybody and everything the benefit of the doubt. See, making the presumption for the status quo is our starting point. Without making the presumption for the status quo, what we're going to do is we start any debate, any even thought. If you're going to think about what should I do today, you're going to start with a blank slate. If you don't make the presumption for the status quo, if you don't ask yourself, what am I doing now? What am I going to do today? Well, what am I doing now? And go from there. Make the presumption for the status quo because it gives you a starting point. Otherwise, you say, "What do I do today?" Well, now you got to draw on a blank, and then then you have to go through all the. Basically, you're going to end up coming back to the status quo, but you're going to do it in a roundabout way. You're going to be looking at your options. What is it possible for me to do? What do I want to do? Fantasizing. Well, I'd really like to be out on a hang glider, that kind of thing, and wasting a lot of time in the process. You make the presumption for the status quo, and you've got a good starting point as to making decision making, whether it involves your own life or we're talking about political policy. Now, another thing is, again, making giving people the benefit of the doubt. Reason you're going to give people the benefit of the doubt, again, it's a good starting point, and there is a basis for it. There are two premises, basic metaphysical premises. One says that the universe is unknowable, it's scary, it's unpredictable, it's terrifying, and failures to be expected. It's called the malevolent universe premise. There's another premise, the opposite of which is the positive or benevolent universe premise that says no, the universe is knowable, it's benevolent, it's kind to human beings. There's not a whole lot of surprises. There are on the margins, but the only reason that there's surprises is because they don't comport with what we normally expect from the universe. And therefore, success is to be expected. So that's where we get into the idea of giving people the benefit of the doubt. For instance, I was reading the other day about, or listening actually, it's on the radio, and they were discussing, it was a political discussion, and it was about a particular person I believe, in Washington, D.C., and who had testified in some way, shape, or form. And the critiquing this testimony said, well, we don't know that he's telling the truth. And he said this absent any evidence that this individual is lying. So what he was doing is trying to start with a blank. He was going malevolent on it. He was not giving the individual the benefit of the doubt. There's no evidence this individual had lied, at least about the subject matter at hand. In other words, lied in a relevant and material way, that he had done so in the past. And what you need to do then is, somebody gives you testimony, you assume they're telling the truth. Okay, they're telling the truth until you have evidence to the contrary. So, in this particular case, again, you would go ahead and that would be your starting point. Okay, we assume that this guy is telling the truth, and then see if his testimony comports with other types of evidence And if it does, then that supports him, and he supports the general conclusion that you're about to draw. If not, then you may assume that either he's making a mistake or uh, finally lying. But it's more than likely that if he's wrong, if he's making a statement that does not comport with reality, that he is mistaken rather than lying. One of the interesting things and important things about the malevolent and benevolent universe premise is that if success is to be expected in the benevolent universe premise, there's no reason to cheat. There's no reason to lie. Okay, you make your mistakes, you take your lumps, and you move on because ultimately you're going to succeed. So that's why lying, cheating, stealing, all of those kinds of things are frowned upon. That's why we prosecute them civilly and criminally. Now, the malevolent universe people say, well, failure is to be expected. Well, if that were true, then how do you explain success? How do you explain multimillionaires? How do you explain just the normal successes of everyday life? The ability of people to learn to read and to get a job and raise children, etc. Well, the only answer or answers to that can be basically threefold: cheating, getting lucky, or a combination of the two. So you have situations, for instance, where um, athletes are interviewed, and very often either the interviewer will ask, "Do you feel lucky?" or a similar type of question, or the athlete will say, "Well, I'm just lucky," and it's wrong. Luck plays a part, but on the margins, on the very margins. Even luck plays on the margins in the lotto. If you win the lotto, you would think, well, that's pure luck. No, you had to have the initiative to go to the store to buy the lottery ticket. You had to also take the initiative to either pick the numbers yourself or do a quick pick. And you had to also have the responsibility to hang on to the ticket and to be able to consummate, if you will, the entire process by cashing in the ticket, excuse me, and picking up your check. So even in the case of lotto, luck is on the margins. You're still required to do something, to exercise good judgment and to exercise responsibility. And but like I said, getting back to my original point is that it is necessary. One of the ideas is, again, if you're dealing with somebody that's given testimony, you assume that what they're telling you is the truth unless, give them the benefit of the doubt, unless there's evidence that they have lied in the past about a similar subject, that they've lied relevantly and materially. Okay, when I come back, it's going to be the last part of Chapter 16 of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Okay, so I'm back, and we were covering Chapter 16, the Fairness Doctrine for Education, in which Ayn Rand was making the case for creating, literally, a fairness doctrine for education. Fairness doctrine used to be a doctrine of the government that said that the news departments that had use of the airwaves, which are considered public, belong to everybody in the United States, that are going to make use of that and have a license, have an automatic obligation to be fair to opposing points of view. They may editorialize, but they have to go ahead and have somebody come on the television and provide a rebuttal if such a person exists. And Ayn Rand is saying that the universities are becoming ever more dogmatic and dogmatic to the left. They're more Marxist, they're more determinist, materialistic, etc., and presenting those kinds of opinions, and at the same time actively seeking to squeeze out opinions of an opposite nature, realistic, Aristotle, and other such conservatism. There you go. And so her point is that we should have the government step in with these universities because she's talking about universities that are publicly funded, and rather than any university that's completely privately funded. The only one I know like that that's completely privately funded is Hillsdale College. They accept absolutely no federal money whatsoever. You can't even get a federal student loan to go to Hillsdale because there's always strings attached. They accept it, then the federal government exercises the right to tell the university what its curriculum should be or what it can or cannot do in various ways, shapes, and forms. But anyways, her point is for the public universities, the government must and should step in and provide a fairness doctrine demanding that for, I'm assuming, every class that has a left-leaning tendency to lean left, that they provided another class that leans right. So let's see. But as in the case of political election campaigns, in which essentials are evaded more stringently than in modern universities, everyone knows implicitly which side he is for or against, though no public voices care to identify the issues explicitly. The consistency of such politicians' or professors' followers is remarkable for men who claim man's inability to distinguish essentials, which is one clue to the motives of the advocates of the non-simplified, i.e., concrete-bound approach. The ability explicitly to identify the essentials of any subject he studies is the first requirement of a student who would want to fight for the fairness doctrine. Then, if he sees that he is offered only one viewpoint on a given fundamental issue and knows that other significant viewpoints exist, he can protest on the grounds of his right to know and to make an informed choice. Significance in this context should be gauged by one of two standards: the degree of historical influence achieved by a given theory, or, if the theory is contemporary, its value in providing original answers to fundamental questions. As in the case of broadcasting, it would be impossible to present every individual's viewpoint. But if the great historical schools of thought were presented, the fairness doctrine would achieve in purpose, or perform its trust-busting function, if you will, the breakup of that one-sided indoctrination which is the hallmark of government-controlled schools. And I want to interject here real quick that I really think that she's wrong in this, in that approaching it from the standpoint of looking at things more subjectively is what she's doing here, saying that the left and the right are basically equal in terms of their potential or actual significance, and so therefore there should be both of them on campus, I guess, to counterbalance each other. What you're really looking for here, and the whole reason you're going to school, is because you want to learn the truth. You don't go to a math class to learn, have the professor say, well, 2 plus 2, or your let's say, not in university, of course, but your grade school, right? Your second grade, and the teacher says, well, 2 plus 2 equals 4. But that's one school of thought. There's another school of thought that says 2 plus 2 equals 5. What? And that's the kind of thing Ayn Rand is advocating. I say no. What this university should be doing is advocating and promoting the truth, that which they know to be true. So, for instance, she's talking about significance. Truth is significant. That's the only real true significance, is truth. Falsity is insignificant. She's talking about historical influence achieved by a given theory, or if the theory is contemporary, its value in providing original answers to fundamental questions. Well, wait. Where's the truth in all this? What about the truth? Okay. Now, if you want to, I mean, I would see, and left is non-truth. It has nothing to do with the truth. It's just about force and trying to fulfill a historical prophecy made by Karl Marx. He prophesied that there was going to be a socialist paradise at some particular point, and so the socialists do whatever it is that they can to move the earth in that direction. So, but they have no interest and don't even pretend to have any interest in the truth. But that's what the university should be interested in. So let's see. In all fields that the government enters outside of its proper sphere, two motives, one vicious, the other virtuous, produce the same results. In the case of schools, the vicious motive is power lust, which prompts a teacher or an educational bureaucrat to indoctrinate students with a single viewpoint, of the kind that disarms them mentally, stunts their critical faculty, and conditions them to the passive acceptance of memorized dogma. And again, really what she should be saying is not that the teacher is indoctrinating students with a single viewpoint, but that the teacher is lying to them, because what they're doing is then taking socialism, which is false, and promoting it as a truth. And that's the problem. That's the issue with the university. That's what cripples man's mental faculties and screws up his mind, is when you're presenting falsity as truth. Especially when you're doing so without any evidence or proof. The virtuous motive is the teacher's integrity. A man of integrity has firm convictions about what he regards as true. Finally, she gets there. He teaches according to his convictions, and he does not propagate or support the theories which he regards as false, though he's able to present them objectively when necessary. And that gets me to the point of, if the universities are going to present Marxist viewpoints, then they should present them as what they are, false and wrong. But say, explore. You can explore Marxism in terms of all of the different theories that it went into it, why it's wrong, how it's wrong, etc. Such a teacher would be invaluable in a private university, but in a government-controlled school, his monopolistic position makes him as tyrannical an indoctrinator as the power luster. The solution is not what the opponents of any firm convictions suggest, that the honest teacher turn into a flexible pragmatist who will switch his ideas from moment to moment, or into a skeptical pig who will eat anything. The consequences of any attempt to rule or to support intellectual activities by means of force will be evil regardless of motives. This does not mean that dissent is essential to intellectual freedom. The possibility of dissent is. And again, she started to go right. She started to hit this thing right on the head, and then she went back and went wrong in saying that somehow the teacher that promotes truth is a problem, is some kind of tyrant. Such a teacher will be invaluable, but in a government-controlled school, makes him as tyrannical an indoctrinator as the power luster. That truth is just simply a dogma, just like falsity. Falsity is a dogma, truth is a dogma, it's all dogma. Baloney. Absolute crap. And shame on Ayn Rand for not seeing that. Who would enforce the fairness doctrine in education? Not the executive branch of government, which is the distributor of the funds and has a vested interest in uniformity, i.e., conformity. The doctrine has to be invoked and upheld by private individuals and groups. And it's not that the executive branch has an interest in uniformity or conformity at all. The problem with having the executive branch go ahead and oversee this is that there's a conflict of interest. It's dispensing the funds, and you cannot have them go ahead and then be the overseer. You would need to have somebody else, Congress, or, like she said, various private agencies. There is another opportunity for those who wish to take practical action and against the growth of statism. This issue could become the goal of an ad hoc movement uniting all men of goodwill, appealing in the name of intellectual justice to whatever element of 19th century liberalism still exists in the minds of academic liberals, as distinguished from the Marcusians who openly propose to drive all dissenters off the university faculties. Is the Marcusians' goal to be achieved at public expense and with government support? If a fairness movement enlisted the talents of some intelligent young lawyers, it could conceivably find support in the courts of law, which are still supposed to protect an individual's civil rights. The legal precedent for a fairness doctrine is to be found in the field of broadcasting. The practical implementation, i.e., the challenge to the establishment in specific cases, is up to the voluntary effort, the dedication, and the persuasiveness of individuals. It must be remembered, firmly that a fairness doctrine is not a string on the university's freedom, but a string on the government's power to distribute public funds. That power has already demonstrated its potential for fantastically evil and blatantly unconstitutional control over the universities. Under threat of withholding government funds and contracts, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare is now imposing racial and sexual quotas on university faculties, demanding that some unspecified number of teachers consist of ethnic minority members and women. To add insult to injury, HEW insists that this is not a demand for quotas, nor a demand to place racial considerations above merit, but a demand for proof that a university, e.g., Columbia, has made an effort to find teachers of equal merit among those groups. Try and prove it. Try and prove that you have searched. Try to measure and prove the various applicants' merit when no precise objective standards of comparison are given or known. The result is that almost any female or minority member is given preference over anyone else. The consequence is a growing anxiety about their future among young teachers who are male and do not belong to an ethnic minority. They are now the victims of the most obscenely vicious discrimination. Obscene because it's perpetrated in the name of fighting discrimination. If the rights of various psychological minorities are so loudly claimed today, what about the rights of intellectual minorities? I have said that the fairness doctrine is a product of the mixed economy. The whole precarious structure of a mixed economy in its transition from freedom to totalitarian statism rests on the power of pressure groups. But pressure group warfare is a game that two or more ideological sides can play as well as one. The disadvantage of the statists is the fact that up to the last minute, and even beyond it, they have to play under cover of the slogans of individual rights and freedom. The advocates of freedom can beat them at their own game by taking them at their word, but playing it straight. The time is right for it. The establishment is not very popular at present, neither politically nor intellectually, neither with the country at large, nor with many of its own members. A movement of the serious students and of the better teachers defending the rights of intellectual minorities and demanding a fairness doctrine for education would have a good chance to grow and succeed. But taking part in such a movement would be much more difficult and demanding than chanting slogans and dancing Ring Around a Rosie on some campus lawn. If student minorities have succeeded in demanding that they be given courses on such subjects as Zen Buddhism, guerrilla warfare, Swahili, and astrology, then the intellectual student minority can succeed in demanding courses on, for instance, Aristotle in philosophy, von Mises in economics, Montessori in education, Hugo in literature. At the very least, such courses would save the student's mind. Potentially, they would save the culture. No, the fairness doctrine would not reform the university's faculties and administrations. There would be a great deal of hypocrisy, of compromising, of cheating, of hiring weak advocates to teach the unfashionable theories of tokenism, of window dressing. But think of what one window can do for a sealed, airless, lightless room. And again, so and I think the fundamental reason that Ayn Rand goes wrong on this issue and doesn't because the ultimate objectivity is truth and falsity. That's objective. But the problem with Ayn Rand, the biggest mistake Ayn Rand made was in creating objectivism. That as soon as she created objectivism, Ayn Rand ceased to be objective. What she simply did was create a philosophy among hosts of other philosophies, Cartesian, Kantian, Hegelian, etc. And that the only difference, therefore, since it's just one of among many, and she's not proclaiming to speak the truth, then the only difference between any of these so-called philosophies, I call them theories, is their popularity. And then the whole struggle is to make one particular philosophical theory dominate by making it more popular than others. And that's how this particular chapter starts to make sense. She, I'm sure, feels that objectivism, which in 1972, I'm sure was not being taught on college campuses and may not be today, is getting left out. And she wants a piece of the pie. And with a fairness doctrine, her philosophical theory would get a foothold intellectually. So, but that's the conclusion of Chapter 16, the Fairness Doctrine for Education. And so tomorrow is going to be starting Chapter 17, which is the last chapter of this book, and it's called What Can One Do? So it ought to be interesting. So when I come back, it's going to be a quick critique of Rush Limbaugh. Hold on. Okay, so I'm back, and this is going to have to be quick. So, from April 27th, and it's titled Brett Baier Exposes Comey on the Dossier. Rush, I've been chomping at the bit to get here. I've been chomping at the bit. I almost called some TV shows and said, you want me on? I got to weigh in on this. I'm talking about the Comey interview on Brett Baier last night. As you people know, this whole dossier thing to me is the most important element of this entire scandal. And Brett Baier zeroed in on it last night and got an answer from Comey that I was not expecting. I'm glad he got it, but I wasn't expecting it. Okay, let me reset the table here for just a moment. And for some of you, it's going to be redundant, and I beg your indulgence on this. We're now a year into the special counsel investigation of Donald Trump. The express purpose of the special counsel is to get rid of Donald Trump. It has been the purpose of it since it began. It's been the purpose of every opposition element from the media, the Democrat Party, and leftist activists since Trump won the election. The primary element in this effort to get rid of Donald Trump has been something called the Steele dossier or the Trump dossier. It's a 36-page document which purportedly claims to have intel that was crafted and discovered by Christopher Steele, a retired British intelligence agency individual who is not even allowed to step foot in Russia, but all of his sources are Russian. And not a single charge, not a single morsel, not a single bit of any of the so-called intelligence in any of these 36 pages has been corroborated. And everybody's using it for the express purpose of conducting this investigation knows that none of it has been verified, none of it has been corroborated. Okay. We know that it has been knowingly used by everybody using it as legitimate intelligence that purports to prove that Trump colluded with Russia to steal the election. But none of that is true. None of the dossier is true. It's not legitimate anything. It's not intelligence. It's not the result of a guy talking to intelligence sources. This is a work of art commissioned by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Let's see. But this was different. Usual opposition research tries to collect things that are somewhat truthful. They can be used at any stage of the campaign, and the later in the campaign, the better, to try to frighten voters that there are things we just now learning about a candidate that make him unacceptable. This thing was created for the express purpose of having it misused. This thing was created knowingly to be used as a phony intelligence. This scandal, this hoax, is miles beyond what anybody could have expected. So let's see. Okay, so the dossier has been used to secure warrants from one of the most powerful courts in the country, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. That court grants warrants to spy on American citizens, either directly or indirectly. This document was presented to the court as real, legitimate intelligence. People doing this, people applying for the warrant, knew that it was nothing more than literally made up BS, literally made up like somebody would write a novel, and it has been used as the foundation for everything in this investigation. All right, let's see. Care, they're willing to help. You can't just go, why don't we do this? See, found. Okay, let's see. Oh, Trump did because he didn't like Obama, blah, 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 blah. All the media reporting. Stuff, come on. Where is Brent Baier? So, this investigation of Trump, you see, who cares? All of this in addition, circulating. He's the president. Here's the FBI director. Okay, here we go. He says, did you tell the president the dossier was actually political opposition research from the Clinton campaign? Comey, no, I don't believe so. You didn't? No, I really don't believe so. In fact, Comey said, I don't think I called it the Steele dossier, and he just glossed over it and Stephanopoulos dropped it. I was not satisfied because that was the question to ask. Did you tell the president this thing's not legitimate? Did you tell the president that everything driving this investigation is nothing more than the ramblings of a Hillary Clinton political operative? No, I didn't. It didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to you? So I've been watching every subsequent interview of Comey and eager to see how many people in the drive-by media would expand on this and focus on it. Nobody did until last night. Let me see. Um, let's see. Discuss Brett Baer's interviewing James Comey. My God, when I got to Well, I'm going to have to pick this up again tomorrow because I had the point that I was going to try to make, and now I can't find it. This is a segment of his show that just seems to go on and on and on and on and say pretty much nothing. It just rehashes all of the things that we already know. And that's one of the things that I find really irritating about Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, is that most of the time, they really have nothing new to say. They just pick up on what, if there's nothing new, no breaking news or anything, then they just go ahead and rehash what they talked about yesterday. And I think that their audiences deserve a whole lot better. In any case, when I come back, it is going to be time for the New York City cab drivers joke book. Okay, I'm back. And again, this is from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book by Jim Peach. A Chinese man and a Jewish man are drinking at a bar. After a little while, the Jewish man leans over and gives the Chinese man a strong punch in the arm. The Chinese man is very startled and exclaims, "What's that for?" "That was for Pearl Harbor," says the Jewish man. "Pearl Harbor was a Japanese." "I'm Chinese," the Oriental man replies. "Ah," says the Jewish man with a wave of his hand. "Japanese, Chinese, what's the difference?" A little while later, the Chinese man leans over and gives the Jewish man a hard punch on the arm. "Hey," says the Jewish guy, "what was that for?" "That was for the Titanic," the Jewish man says. "The Titanic," says the bewildered Jew. "That was an iceberg." "Ah," says the Chinese man with a wave of his hand. "Iceberg, Goldberg, what's the difference?" A woman says to a Martian, "Do you smoke after sex?" The Martian thinks for a moment, then says, "I don't know. I never looked." Louis is talking to his friend and says, "Guess what? Everyone in the world knows me." "Sure they do," says the skeptical friend. But Louis insists it's true. "Oh yeah," the friend answers. "Well, I bet Bob Hope doesn't know you." "Okay, come on," says Louis. He takes his friend to the airport, they fly to California and go out to the golf course where Bob Hope is just teeing off. Bob Hope looks up and, seeing the two men approaching, runs up shouting, "Louis, Louis, how have you been?" He gives Louis a big hug and insists on taking the two men to lunch. After Louis and his friend have lunch, they leave the restaurant, and the friend says, "Okay, Bob Hope knows you, but that doesn't mean everybody knows you. I bet your own senator doesn't know you." "Come with me," says Louis. Two men fly to Washington and go into the Capitol. They enter the Senate chamber. Louis' senator stands up and says, "Gentlemen, Louis is here." Senators all jump up and cheer, crowding around Louis. They adjourn for the day and take Louis and his friend to dinner. The friend is very impressed. After dinner, the friend says to Louis, "All right, I admit that probably everyone in this country knows you, but what about Europe? I'll bet Bjorn Borg doesn't know you." The next day, the two men fly to Sweden. At the airport, they happen to run into Bjorn Borg, who's on his way to Monaco. "Louis," says Bjorn, "I'm sorry, but I'm just leaving Sweden. Say, why don't you and your friend come to Monaco for a week as my personal guests?" At the end of the week, as Louis and his friends are sitting by the pool, the friend says, "Well, Louis, a lot of people certainly seem to know you, but you say everybody knows you, and I bet the Pope doesn't know you." The next day, they fly to Rome. When they get in the Vatican, Louis walks up to the gate, and he's let in for a special audience with the Pope. Louis tells his friend to wait in St. Peter's Square. As the friend is standing in the square, the Pope comes out onto the balcony. The crowd lets out a roar. Then Louis follows the Pope out onto the balcony, and the crowd lets out another roar. As Louis and the Pope are standing arm in arm, waving to the crowd, Louis looks down and sees his friend faint. Louis runs down into the crowd and gets to his friend just as the friend is coming to. "What happened?" says Louis. "Was it too much for you that the Pope knew me too?" "That was very impressive," says the friend, rubbing his forehead. "But what really got to me was when a man came up to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, 'Hey, who's that guy with Louis?'" And this is the end of another fine segment of story time. And until tomorrow, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.